Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be deviating from my usual Taurus rising routine. As far as my chart ruler series goes, or I should say house ruler series goes, and I'm going to talk about the overview or overlay in a natal horoscope. Now, the first thing I would look at when you're just, firstly, when you're doing an overview overlay, you're looking for, significant prominent things in the horoscope that are going to stand out. And, if you're just trying to look for things that are, the real important things in the chart, you're going to be talking about things that are going to be pertaining, I guess you could say, to the overview. And it's kind of like a summary or summation, I guess you could say, summarizing the horoscope. So anyway, let me get started. Well, the first thing you can look at is, naturally, look at the sun, the moon, and the ascendant. And these proponents obviously are going to figure strongly in one's demeanor and disposition, personality. I have, as many of you know that I've mentioned before, my sun sign is in Cancer, my moon's in Gemini, my rising sign is Taurus. So naturally, the Taurus rising is going to give me more stability and persistence and stick-to-itiveness than your typical Cancer Gemini, mercurial combination. But in looking at it from another vantage point, we could also say that the fact that I have the Cancer Sun and Gemini Moon is going to make me a little bit more pliable and adaptable than your average Taurus rising person as well. So anyway, next thing I would look at the chart, see what planet rules the chart, which is the ruling planet of your ascendant. Me having Taurus rising, that would be Venus, and it is posited in my 4th house. So it shows that my outer personality is projected strongly in home matters, and shows I can be, introverted, and I like peace, harmony, tranquility in the home. And the Taurus rising will come out strong in matters pertaining to the 4th house. Now, the next thing I would do is look at, the chart, look at the picture, look at it, and see how the planets are dispersed in the horoscope. And if you have majority of the planets are below the horizon, running through house 1 through 6, person's apt to be more introverted, maybe introspective, kind of more about themselves, doing things more secrecy and private, as opposed to out, in public. If the person has preponderance of planets above the horizon, which would fall between houses 7 through 12, then the person's going to be the antithesis of this, and is going to be, extroverted, more about people, more group-oriented, more outgoing, and doing things with others, and more, I'd say, also more objective as opposed to subjective. Also, you can look and see how many planets are on the left side of the chart, how many are on the right. If the majority of the planets are on the left side of the chart, then you're looking at a person that is more self-sufficient, self-reliant, and independent. If the majority of the planets lie on the right side of the chart, this person might not quite be always self-sufficient. It could be certain dependency on others more, and their actions in their course of life might be predicated somewhat on others' actions, and it has to do more with like maybe partners or other people they're involved with, is where they're the course of the direction their life may go to some degree. The next thing I would look at, I'll look and see if your chart has a particular pattern. There's like maybe 7 major patterns it could be in a horoscope. My chart pattern is the bowl, and the word I always see online that's used to describe this is self-contained. And maybe someone could help me with this, because self-contained has like 2 or 3 different definitions. I don't know if they're meaning that I'm self-sufficient and self-reliant, and I do things without bothering people, that I'm unobtrusive that way, or is it just the simple fact that I'm introverted, or is it both? Um, but anyway, a chart, the bold chart pattern, for example, in my case, could indicate someone that has a certified of direction and focus and single-minded type energy, and have an abundance of energy in general. And the emphasis, you know, is going to be more focused on things that are more, I guess you could say, private or introverted, because most of the planets in my bold chart fall below the horizon. 8 of the 10 do. So, you know, that's where, you know, that activity is significant at. Now, another thing I would look at is see how many planets that you have in masculine and how many in feminine, and this could have some effect on extroversion, introversion. If the majority of the planets are in masculine signs, and that goes more toward extroversion, more in feminine signs more toward introversion. And also look at the how many are in what in the element. If you have most your planets, say, in water sign, it could indicate a lot of emotionality and sensitivity, very insightful. If you have most of your planets fall in air, it shows someone very communicative, eloquent, someone that's very conversational, and you know, likes it, you know, and emphasizes intellect, being very verbose, articulate. Also, you can look and see how many of your planets fall in the certain quality, I guess you could say, either fixed, you know, cardinal, or mutable. Someone with a preponderance of planets in mutable signs obviously is going to be very adaptable and will be willing to make many compromises in relationships. Most of my planets fall in cardinal, which can show someone that has certain enterprise, is in a hurry to get things done, may embark on a number of projects simultaneously, but not necessarily finish all of them, you know, due to the fact that, you know, due to impatience possibly, and starting maybe more than, you know, than I can handle sometimes. Another thing you look and see if there's any configurations in the horoscope. And what I mean by that, for example, it's like you know, like a fixed T-square. I have a fixed T-square. It's kind of a long one because, you know, there's one aspect that goes, you know, beyond the you know, the allowed orb a little bit. But nonetheless, someone with a fixed T-square, for example, like me, you know, can be, you know, resolute and have certain single-minded focus and persistence, but also can be somewhat inflexible and intractable. So look for configurations in the, you know, in the chart, you know, in your chart as well. That's very important. And see if it comes to a final signature. And to ascertain or determine the final signature, you would take, you know, the quality and element in your chart that has the most signs, and then consolidating it to form one sign. So in my chart, I have 4 planets in water signs, and I have 5 in cardinal, and I have the most in both of those. So that comes, cardinal in water equals Cancer, because Cancer is the cardinal water sign. So, you know, Cancer figures prominently, you know, in my personality, obviously. Not only that, I have the Sun, Mercury, and Mars in Cancer, so, and also Venus in the 4th house, so there's extra Cancer influence. Another thing to look at, see if your chart has a mutual reception or final dispositor. Mutual reception happens when you have 2 planets in each other's domiciles or rulerships. In my case, I have a mutual reception. I have Moon in Gemini and Mercury in Cancer. If you switch those signs around, it comes to Moon in Cancer, Mercury in Gemini. The traditional astrologers, some of them might think that, you know, this almost acts like, you know, where I would almost act like Moon in Cancer and take on some of the characteristics of Moon in Cancer, Mercury in Gemini. But the majority of people think that the qualities just blend in, and I have, you know, my intellect and emotion can come out, you know, in positive way. For example, maybe I emotionally communicate, you know, very well, or show sensitivity to others through, you know, through my strong communication ability. You know, as for example. Another thing is that the final dispositor, that's something that's very hard to explain, and some people believe that that could be that the final dispositor. I could sum this up a little. It's often very similar, I mean, in terms of its significance in the chart, to the chart ruler. And the final dispositor is often if you have a planet that falls in its ruling sign, such as Venus in Libra, or say the Moon in Cancer, Mercury in Gemini, then often, if you only have one, then that's often, one planet that falls in its ruling sign could very well be the final dispositor. But it's not. But if you have two planets that fall in the signs it rules, then you won't have it. A mutual reception is often perceived as having two final dispositors if it all come, if the chain of those planets in the chart, which is the final, I'm talking about trying to know about the final dispositor. The chain of those planets, if they all come back to those two planets in mutual reception, then some people say that that's like two final dispositors. I don't necessarily go with that. I think it might mean that the mutual reception is more emphasized and more intense, because I think you can't really have two, final dispositors. It's either one or the other. I think it just really comes down to that one. In many, it would generally be the planet you have in your horoscope that has a ruling sign with it. Is generally the final dispositor. But if you have any questions pertaining to it, I could send you some links to it, and which would elaborate or elucidate further on what that is. Also, the planet in your chart that has the most aspects obviously will take on some significance as well, because there's going to be a lot of action and energy activity associated with that planet. I have Mercury making 6 aspects to my major aspects in my chart, including one to my midheaven. And so that's obviously a strong planet in my chart, Mercury communication. Not only that, I have, the Sun and Mercury conjunct my 3rd house. I have the Moon in Gemini. I have Mars in the 3rd house. The ruler of my 3rd house is posited in my 1st house, and that's Moon in Gemini in my 1st house. And and also my Moon in Gemini is in my mutual reception with my Mercury in Cancer. So that's a very significant, obviously the Gemini 3rd house thing is strong in my horoscope. Another thing is, if you have an unaspected planet, that could take on some significance as well. And if, say for example, if the Moon is unaspected in your natal chart, it could show somebody that shows unbridled emotion without restraint, or it could indicate somebody that's very reluctant, to show maybe their emotions and very inhibited. It could either go one way or the other, and it could depend on the house. If it was, say, in the 12th house, the person might be more inhibited in showing the emotion, or in the 1st house could be very vocal as far as the emotions go. Also look to see if there's any intercepted signs, houses in your horoscope that will take on some significance. Interception of signs of planets in your houses often are, it shows energy that's suppressed, and often not really maybe quite understanding the nature of how to utilize it. I have Pluto in the 5th house, that's intercepted, and it could show that maybe, as far, Pluto can rule power and control. 5th house is connected with romance and enjoyment. It could show that maybe that energy has not really been strong in my nature. It could indicate that maybe I've been manipulated, I've been controlled in certain, romantic situations, and because the Pluto energy is not really expressed readily, and since it's like hidden, I think, you might not quite, when someone has a planet that's intercepted, the energy is not always readily expressed. And it could be maybe sometimes expressed on to the person rather than that person actually expressing it. Another thing to look at is look at, see what aspects in your horoscope are most exact, and those aspects will take on some strong meaning. My Mars sextile Saturn is very close. My Uranus conjuncts my 6th house cusp, and Uranus is connected with astrology, and I mean it's very close. It's almost exactly conjunct my 6th house. So I think that's part of the reason why I have such infatuation, enamored with astrology. And another thing I wanted to get with you on is look and see, if you have a number of retrograde planets in your horoscope, and if you have, like, I don't say just multiple, but say 3 or more. This is discretional. Some people will say 4 or more, maybe. 3 or more planets in retrograde might indicate procrastination in certain areas in your life. Things might be prolonged, delayed, protracted. It could show people that have some introversion or maybe inhibited in certain ways. It could show greater success and where the person might flourish, more, in the maybe later on in life as opposed to the earlier part in the person's life. So anyway, people, that will do it for this YouTube astrological segment of me dissertating about the overview or overlay in a natal horoscope. And stay tuned next time, where I'll be continuing my, you could say, my house ruler series, and I'll be talking about the ruler of the 3rd house posited in the 6th house in a natal horoscope. 2 things I want to get with you on before I head out. Firstly, the stars may impel, but do not compel. And secondly, never isolate any single astrological element, aspect, planetary placement, position, configuration, influence, or what have you, and make an analysis on a person, astrologically speaking, based on this alone, because a person astrologically is the sum of all their components in their natal chart, and not just one. Until next time, people, stay well.